Greetings gamers, ex-gamers and friends and family of gamers. Day 22 of Game Free January happened, rather uneventfully, despite having turned up the heat on my challenge in the hope of getting some withdrawal symptoms. I had a good sleep and awoke refreshed, was calm throughout the day and wasn't remotely tempted to game. On the weight front, I still haven't lost any weight. Okay, it's gone down by another 0.2 kilograms, but my weight is still comfortably within the error bars of the original reading, given that our weight can fluctuate by plus or minus 1 kilogram a day. So that's mostly due to fluid intake. So I'm not comfortable declaring that I've actually lost any weight. Then again, it has only been 3 days. Now, as you know, I've been filling my time that would otherwise have been spent gaming with research on addiction, and that's got me wondering if the act of filling my time with research for these videos hasn't simply displaced the gaming, which could account for why there's no temptation. And this brings me to the topic of today's video, which is boredom. Since childhood, we've all had that unpleasant feeling where we feel like there's nothing to do, or rather, there's nothing to do that we want to do. We've either finished all the tasks that we simply have to do, or else we're putting them off, and we're looking around for some entertainment, but none of the things we used to take pleasure in doing gives us any pleasure anymore, and we cry out in exasperation, "I'm bored!" Carol Bennett, writing for Psychology Today, has cleverly adapted the old and well-worn phrase "idle hands are the devil's plaything," or a slightly less known variant, "idle hands are the devil's workshop," to read, "an idle mind is the devil's playground." It goes on to say, boredom usually stems from one's own lack of motivation, endeavour or creativity. Everyone gets bored now and then, but it is the difference between changing that mood to healthy alternatives versus sitting around with friends passing the pipe for a few high-flying hits that this kind of boredom can ultimately lead to an antisocial, destructive path towards addiction. The Boulevard Treatment Centre's website seems to blame too much screen time in childhood for addictive pattern behaviours in adulthood due to the child failing to learn how to entertain themselves. They say, adolescence is a time when we may learn the skills needed to handle boredom in adulthood. Adolescents who develop a dependence on the sensory overload offered to them, TV, movies, the internet, video games, etc., may come to find the rest of their lives understimulating. They can lose the skills for self-entertainment, and the resulting boredom can bring anxiety. Now, as a child who grew up with television in his bedroom, his own record player, by the way, that's what we used to have before MP3 players, and a video games console, I can honestly say that I don't feel that I was deprived of the ability to cope with boredom and make my own entertainment. In fact, I don't think I've felt bored since early adolescence. Now, in a spirit of full disclosure, I am morbidly obese, and it's possible that I haven't been bored because of comfort eating. Again, that being said, I have dieted before, and even while I was losing weight, I still wasn't bored. The factors that drove me to abandon my diet were generally stress and tiredness. I honestly don't feel that too much telly is the reason why so many adolescents smoke and drink alcohol, especially since levels of smoking and drinking were far higher in the age before television. Now, I've had the privilege of living in a world where the internet never existed, and I can tell you that smoking was very nearly ubiquitous. I think a handful of ultra-religious people refused to smoke, but aside from that, I knew of nobody who didn't smoke. These days, at least in Britain, smoking is down to around 15% of the population. I'm not saying that the internet is responsible for the drop in smoking levels, of course not, that would be silly. The rise in vaping, nicotine patches, nicotine gums, smoking cessation adverts, tighter regulations and much better understanding of addiction of tobacco and the risks to health are all important factors. But what I am saying is that to blame too much screen time in childhood on addiction in adulthood is lazy thinking and a gross oversimplification of a very complex issue. Despite the fact that many of the organisations that work with addicts maintain that boredom is strongly linked to the risk of developing and maintaining an addiction, as well as increasing the risk that someone will relapse after trying to quit an addiction, there is oddly a dearth of scholarly material on the subject of boredom and substance abuse. However, there does seem to be a plentiful supply of scholarly articles mentioning boredom along with behavioural or non-chemical addictions such as gambling, internet addiction, smartphone addiction and gaming addiction. Kimberly Mercer and John Eastwood, writing for International Gambling Studies, argues that individuals gamble in order to increase arousal rather than to avoid the negative effect associated with boredom. Moreover, results also suggest that boredom is distinctly related to gambling problems above and beyond its overlap with sensitivity to reward. Cheng Chen and Louis Leong, writing for Telematics and Informatics, rather than reporting a link between boredom and the risk of developing an addiction to games or relapsing, link leisure boredom to the intensity of game use. So from the admittedly limited research I've been able to do on the link between boredom and addiction, it looks to me like while those who work with addicts link boredom to the likelihood of relapse and the risk of becoming an addict, those in academia that study addictions seem to be more of the opinion that boredom may play a role in making the problem worse, but is not a significant risk factor in people actually becoming an addict. If you feel that you might have a problem with excessive gaming and are worried that you might be developing an addiction, why not follow along or try out this simple test of going game free for a month? Remember, it can be any month and you don't have to start on the 1st. Why not post a comment and let me know how you're doing, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. But as for me, hopefully soon to be slightly less big fat hairy 22 days and counting non-gamer, I'll look forward to seeing you in another video.